There is a check I did at the auction lane that took me 30 seconds. Not a minute. 30 seconds. And it killed 1 out of every 3 deals I considered before they ever had a chance to go wrong. I didn't need a lift. I didn't need a mechanic. I didn't pull a report or call anybody. I crouched down, angled a flashlight, and I knew. Clean by or walk away. Every time. The used car industry has known for decades that the undercarriage tells the whole story of a vehicle's life. Where it lived, how it was used, whether it was wrecked and repaired, and whether someone tried to hide all of that before you showed up. They know this because I knew it, and people like me built careers on it. And here's the thing, they're not going to walk you around the back of that car and squat down with you. That check costs them money. Your ignorance is the margin. The average used car buyer spends between $28,000 and $35,000 on a vehicle. According to a 2023 report from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, over 450,000 vehicles with prior structural damage are sold in the United States each year with incomplete or misleading disclosures. Almost 500,000 every year. And a significant percentage of those are hidden behind a coat of undercoating, that black spray-on compound that dealers use to make a corroded, compromised undercarriage look like a freshly detailed one. This isn't negligence. Someone in a corporate office did the math. A $40 can of rubberized undercoating applied to a frame with $3,000 worth of hidden rust problems generates a transaction that couldn't happen otherwise. That's not a detailing upgrade. That's a concealment tool. I'm going to walk you through exactly what I looked at when I was buying cars wholesale, what each thing means, what it costs when you miss it, and what you need in your hand to see it clearly, in a parking lot, on your lunch break, before you hand anyone $1. Most buyers walk around a car at eye level. They check the paint. They look at the tyres. They sit inside and smell it. All of that matters, but none of it tells you what happened to that car. The undercarriage tells you what happened to that car. Frame rot on a unibody vehicle, which is how most modern cars and SUVs are built, doesn't just affect resale value. It affects structural integrity in a collision. The NHTSA has documented cases where vehicles with compromised unibody frames failed to absorb crash energy correctly, shifting impact forces directly to the occupant compartment. This isn't theoretical. It's in the data. Brake lines that run along the undercarriage of a car corrode from the outside in. You can't see that from inside the wheel well. You need to look along the body of the car, underneath. A brake line that looks intact can have surface corrosion so severe that a hard stop, not an accident, just a hard stop, causes it to rupture. The FTC has flagged this repeatedly in used vehicle safety bulletins. Subframe mounts, the bolted connection points between the subframe and the unibody, crack and corrode silently. The car drives fine on flat road. Hit a pothole at 40 miles an hour and you feel it differently. Take a fast turn and the handling response is wrong in a way you can't name. Exhaust hangers hold the exhaust system in place along the bottom of the car. When they rust through and the exhaust drops, it can contact fuel lines. That's not a rattle. That's a fire risk. None of this is visible on a Carfax. None of it shows up on a dealer inspection certificate. The car can pass a state safety inspection with every one of these problems present, because inspectors check brake function, not brake line condition, and they check frame integrity under load, not frame corrosion depth. The system wasn't built to protect you. It was built to move inventory. Here's what I carried with me at the auction, and here's what you're going to carry into every dealer lot from this point forward. The first thing is a flashlight. Not a phone flashlight, a dedicated flashlight with a beam you can narrow and angle. I use the Phoenix E18R. It runs about $45 on Amazon. At the auction, I'd clip it to my jacket. The reason you don't use your phone is that you need one hand free to brace yourself and one hand to direct the light. And you cannot move a phone beam with precision while you're shifting your position underneath a car. The Phoenix gives you a focus beam you can control without looking at it. Get down at the back corner of the vehicle, driver's side rear. That's your starting point, not because it's the worst spot, but because it's the most honest spot. Rear frame rails on most vehicles take the first structural rust because road spray, salt and water collect there. Point the beam up and forward along the inside of the frame rail. What you're looking for is colour and texture. Clean metal is silver grey. Surface rust is orange. Deep rust is dark brown with a flaky, pitted texture. It looks eaten. Bondo, or filler, looks lighter than the surrounding metal and slightly smooth in a way that doesn't match the texture around it. And fresh undercoating, applied to hide something, looks thick and uneven, with visible drip marks or spray build-up in corners and seams where metal meets metal. Clean factory undercoating is thin, consistent and old. It doesn't look fresh. If you're looking at an 8-year-old car with undercoating that looks like it was applied in the last 6 months, that's not a detail job, that's a cover-up. Now move to the centre of the vehicle. Look up at the floor pan. Press your knuckle against it if you can reach it safely. Solid metal sounds like a tap. Rusted through or Bondo patch floor pan sounds hollow, slightly dead. You'll know the difference. You don't need training for this. Just do it and trust what you hear. Look along both sides for brake lines. They run parallel to the car body, usually clipped to the frame with small plastic or metal retainers. You're looking for lines that are uniformly dark and intact versus lines that show orange or brown discoloration, bubbling on the surface, or bends that look crimped rather than smooth. A crimped brake line in a used car that hasn't been in a documented accident means something bent it. That's a question with no good answer. Check the exhaust hangers. They're rubber loops that hold the pipes in place. If they're cracked, stretched, or missing, if the exhaust pipe is sitting closer to the car's underbody than it should be, that's deferred maintenance that costs $80 to $300 to fix. Not dangerous on its own, but it tells you how the previous owner maintained the car. And if they skipped the $80 exhaust hanger, they skipped other things. Now move to the front subframe. Get to the front of the car, same position, crouched at the corner, flashlight angled up. The subframe is the large structural member that the engine, transmission and suspension attach to. On most front-wheel drive vehicles, it's clearly visible. You're checking the mounting points where the subframe bolts to the unibody. Clean mounts show uniform metal. Cracked or stressed mounts show fracture lines radiating out from the bolt holes, surface rust concentrated at the stress points, or evidence of welding that wasn't there from the factory. Any of that tells you the car took a hit significant enough to affect the subframe, and that hit may or may not be in the vehicle history. The tool that confirms what your eyes see is the magnet test kit from Rangitech. It runs about $28, comes with small, rare earth magnets, and it's the same principle body shops use to detect filler. Bondo doesn't hold a magnet the same way steel does. Run the small magnet across the frame rail, the subframe, and the rocker panels. If it sticks consistently, you have solid metal. If it slides or doesn't grip in spots, there's filler under there. Somebody patched something they didn't want to disclose. I rejected cars at the auction on this test alone, not because the car wasn't drivable, sometimes it was fine, but because the concealment of the damage meant the dealer or the wholesaler had made a deliberate choice to hide information from the next buyer. And in a private sale or a dealer sale, that's exactly what happens to you. They didn't stop hiding it because they got into the dealer business. They got better at it. Everything I've described so far cost you about $75 total. The flashlight and the magnet kit, $75 on a $30,000 purchase. The math there doesn't need a comment. But the inspection is only part of the picture. The other part is knowing what to do with what you find. If you see fresh undercoating on a car that doesn't have a documented detail service on the Carfax, ask. Not accusatorially, just ask. I notice the undercoating looks pretty fresh. Was that done recently? Watch what they say. If they don't know, that's an answer. If they deflect, that's a different answer. If they say, we do it on all our vehicles, ask for the detail invoice. That invoice should exist. If it doesn't, the undercoating wasn't a service. It was a concealment. If the magnet test shows filler on the frame rail and there's no accident on the Carfax, that's a title wash vehicle or a cash repaired vehicle. Either way, it's a car that was hit hard enough to need structural repair, and whoever owned it afterward chose not to go through insurance. That choice protects their rate. It hides the damage from you. Walk away from those, not because the car can't be driven, because you will never know the full scope of what was done to repair it, whether the repair was done correctly, or how the compromised structure will behave in a future accident. You can't insure against what you can't quantify. The Dealer Vault Guide compiles the complete inspection checklist, every checkpoint, in the sequence I used at the auction, with photo references for what each problem looks like. It also covers what questions to ask and what the dealer's answer tells you. Link in the description. Take it with you. One more check. This one people miss completely. Look at the underside of the rear bumper cover. Not the bumper itself, the cover. On most modern vehicles, the rear bumper cover is plastic and it extends down and under the rear of the car. Crouch at the rear, look up at the underside of that cover. If you see scuff marks, scratching or fresh paint on the underside, that car was rear-ended. Not necessarily hard, but enough. And if it's not in the Carfax, someone made a choice about that. Fender benders don't always go through insurance. People pay out of pocket to avoid rate increases. The car gets repainted, the bumper cover gets replaced, and the history report shows nothing. But the underside of that bumper cover tells you, because painters don't paint the underside, and body shops don't always replace the cover when they can save it. The scuff marks stay. 30 seconds. That's all this takes once you know what you're looking at. You walk around the back, you crouch down, you angle the light. The car either passes or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, you walk away. Not angry, not making a scene. You just stand up, thank them for their time, and you leave, because you know something they were betting you didn't. The next time you walk onto a dealer lot, you are not the same buyer you were before you watch this. That's not a figure of speech. The checks you've learned, the frame rail inspection, the floor pan tap, the brake line scan, the magnet test, the bumper cover check, those are the same tools I used to reject cars before they could cost me money. I use them on behalf of myself. Now you use them on behalf of yourself. The salesman who approaches you will size you up in the first 30 seconds. That's their job. They're looking for hesitation, for excitement, for the body language of someone who's already decided they want the car before they've looked under it. You're going to give them none of that. You're going to walk to the back corner, crouch down, and pull out a flashlight. And that single act changes the entire dynamic of the transaction. They're not dealing with an easy sale. They know it immediately. 1 in 3 cars I looked at the auction failed the undercarriage check. 1 in 3. That number didn't surprise me. I'd seen it enough that it became expected. What will surprise you is seeing it for the first time on a car that looked perfect, from the outside, with a clean Carfax, sitting on a lot with a warranty sticker on the windshield. That moment, when the flashlight shows you what the paint hid, is the moment you understand why this check exists and why they'd rather you never learned it. If someone you know is shopping for a used car right now, a family member, a friend, anyone, send this to them before they sign anything. Not as a suggestion, because the average cost of a frame repair or structural correction on a vehicle purchased without this inspection is between $2,500 and $8,000, depending on the damage. And that repair hits after the deal is done, after the financing is locked, after the grace period has passed. That's not a figure I'm extrapolating. The National Automobile Dealers Association's own data puts average undisclosed structural repair costs in that range for vehicles that pass visual inspection but fail mechanical inspection afterward. The buyers who paid that cost didn't know to crouch down and look. Now you do. Subscribe if you want to stay armed. Not as a favour to this channel, because the next video covers what finance officers slip into your contract in the final 10 minutes of a deal, after you've been sitting in that room for 2 hours and your guard is down. That's where the real money gets taken, and you're going to need to know it before you sit across that desk. Everything shared here is general consumer information. Always have a qualified mechanic perform a full pre-purchase inspection before buying any used vehicle.